Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, whatever time it is for you. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you're doing well. It's 2 a.m. for me right now, burning the midnight oil, and not the best at talking. But today I'm going to be talking about a little hobby of mine, why I collect knives. Why can't I talk? I don't know. Why do I collect knives? At what point do you say you are a collector is also a good question. I would say when you have knives or things that you don't use and that you just kind of put up on a shelf just because you like them. I would say 85% of my knives get used. And how many do I have? I actually don't know. Probably 40-ish, but I haven't really counted. I have a lot, but most of them get used. There are some that are older and lower quality, so they just kind of get put somewhere, and if I need them for cutting up a steak or something random, that's what they're there for. But I don't really like them. They're just kind of there because I've moved on to bigger, better things. I've actually had people ask me, why do you carry a knife? And they're kind of serious about it. Let's just let you think about that. I guarantee you're going to come up with some ideas if you try hard enough. I carry a knife for the same reason I put a seatbelt on. For the same reason I have extra food set aside. For the same reason I carry a flashlight. By the way, this is a Pelican 2360. I know my camera's probably backwards. Pelican 2360, fantastic flashlight. This is my third. One I lost and one died when a battery dissolved inside it. But I've carried one for like 4 or 5 years. This one is probably on year 3 or something. They're just tanks. Awesome flashlight. Best flashlight I've ever had. If you carry, another example is a handkerchief, which is something I started carrying more recently. I always have a handkerchief on me now, unless I forget to stash one in a different pair of pants I'm putting on for the day. But if you have it on you, just like a multi-tool, you will be surprised at the random situations that come up, and you'll be like, oh, cool, I have a tool for that. I don't have to go ask for help. And when you're that person that's ready for something random, it's a good feeling. It makes you feel very independent, capable of randomness. Gotta keep this going. One thing people often think of is they think a knife is a weapon. Intent for why you're carrying one is, to me, not so important, because you never know what you're going to need it for. An apple, orange, banana, a box, a bag, a ratchet strap. Just randomness will come into your day and you'll quickly be able to take care of it. As a weapon, to me, that is the last. I'm terrified for my life. I have no other option, because if you're wrestling with someone and you're that close to be able to use a knife, you really do not want to get a knife involved. Both of you, yeah. How do I say this? You are both going to end up cut. And maybe they're going to get it away from you, and now they got your knife. That sucks. And I don't carry any of my knives with the intent of them being weapons, unless that 1 in a million situation. But I would be so scared to get it involved, because I'm probably going to get hurt. It's so dangerous to be wrestling with a brick, let alone something sharp. It's not a good plan. and I don't have the training to be able to, even guys with the training will tell you, don't get a knife involved, or run. First option, always run. Sometimes I'll have my kids with me, won't be able to run, but hopefully I'm never in that situation. And hopefully I was clear about that. I do not want a knife involved in an altercation. But why do I collect them? Well, first, maybe I'll show you what I got. This is a little wallet. This is the Marfione Custom Knives logo just on a patch here. This is a handmade wallet by a guy I found on a group page. It's just a little pouch. And in there I keep a little Victorinox Swiss Army thing. I found this in a backpack at Goodwill, so it was free. On the blade is stamped a year. This is one of my older knives. I probably have a knife that's maybe, a couple knives that are maybe pushing 80 years old. Some old little doctor penknife type thing. This has stamped 87 on the blade. This is a 1987 knife. It's shown some love. It was in a backpacker's backpack with his Patagonia wool blanket and some other stuff. So this is really cool. It stays in my pouch. Comes in handy for random stuff every now and then. I'm just gonna put my pipe down because I'm talking. I usually carry quite a few knives because I'm always in a weird situation, and I also like to pick up random pieces of wood and turn them into stuff. A lot of my accessories for pipe smoking, which is probably a separate video, such as this tamper. Literally just a piece of wood that I found in the sand at a playground. A lot of the wood in the sand at playgrounds is really well dried out, so I love working with that kind of stuff. I just taper an end for moving the bowl around, and then a tamper for packing the bowl, but that'll probably be a different video showing off different stuff I made from wood. But that's often what it's used for, as well as random stuff throughout the day for work and whatever. This is a Chris Reeves large Sebenza plane, the model 31. This is I want to say a $550 knife, titanium handle. I don't recall the blade steel right off the top of my head, but it's a pretty good blade steel. Made in Idaho, all American made. Amazing precision. Why is this so expensive? Because it's really precise. There will be people that will carry this one knife for 10, 20 years and it gets better with age. It's like wine. The grind on here is a little complex. It's not a flat line going straight down. There's a little curve to this. So as you sharpen it through the life of the knife, it's going to stay thin behind the edge. I'll probably do a more detailed review on this knife at some point, and along with a lot of these other knives that I just haven't got along to reviewing. Microtech Combat Troodon. Glass breaker, aluminum handle. This is a black and bronze model, which is kind of my, I'll do a video on my other Microtechs, but I like the black and bronze. It's black, it's like just a nice color. This is an automatic out the front. This is a single edge. I also have a double edge Combat Troodon. I think this is a $580 knife. M390 steel. Doesn't have that fancy grind, because that's tricky to do. That takes some crazy machinery, some big old grind discs that do that taper. Some people do it by hand, but those, you're going to be paying a lot for a hand ground knife of that kind of precision, because it's complicated. Pretty sharp knife, great blade steel. The reason these, I don't want to get into legality because it's silly. To me, an out the front is the safest knife I think you can get, because you never really have an excuse for touching the blade. Your thumb does everything. You don't have to touch the blade or interact with it. They can get dirty in here. You can get lint and junk and whatever that will cause them to misfire. It's not going to penetrate into a person. If you're familiar with OTFs, you'll know this. It's going to stop. it's gonna pop off a trail inside this interior track. To fix it, you just reset it, it's done. Fantastic knife. They're one of the largest out the fronts that they make, and I got big hands, so I love it. I have some other smaller ones, but I'll show those off at a later date. Amazing knife. You got to take care of them. You can't just be getting them dirty, so they're not the best for if I'm out in the country camping and stuff like that. This is more if I'm in a cleaner environment. But they're so convenient. If I'm opening a box and my little girl runs in the room or something, instantly it's closed, it's put away. I don't have to interact with the blade and risk slicing my thumb. Like these other, a traditional folder, this is not a snappy knife. It's not what they're made for. This is for taking your time. I think their motto, think twice, cut once. So it's about, these knives are about taking your time, doing it right, a precise cut, being safe. That's what these knives are about. But some of these other knives, they'll have, like this is not drop shut. You have to push it. It's stiff, which is nice. But some of these knives will fall on your thumb if you just let it flop down or whatever. So some of those knives, we got to interact with the blade a little bit more. Can be a little more risky. But that's like a grandpa, a guy who wants a high quality knife and isn't trying to be cool kind of knife. Those are beautiful. This is a Benchmade pouch that I had a Microtech, or a Benchmade Infidel in, and that knife went missing. It fell out of my pocket. It was like a $400 knife. At the time, the most expensive knife I had ever bought, and went missing. That was sad. That wasn't out the front like this, different style, different maker. But I repurposed this bag and put a Olight, I think it's the i3T EOS. This is a titanium little flashlight. It's just a little backup guy that I throw in here and carry around every now and then. And also in here I have a Benchmade Osborne 940 with a carbon fiber. It's also got blue standoffs in there, which you might not be able to see. I'll probably do a review on this guy later. I gifted my brother one of these in aluminum, which I love the green aluminum. Carbon fiber doesn't pick up anywhere. This is like a 5-6-year-old knife, and it looks brand new. The thing's beautiful. I took the clip off of it because I don't carry it in my pocket, but and I was skateboarding on my longboard, and my daughter thought it would be funny to trip me with a stick, and I fell and just scraped the heck out of the pocket clip, which kind of made it look cool, but it feels so good in the hand without a pocket clip, and it stays in the pouch, so that's fine to me. This is a little bit small for my hands, but with that pocket clip out, it just feels so good. It's a beautiful knife. This has their axis lock mechanism, so you pull this down. It's on both sides. You don't need to pull it down. You just push it out with your thumb, but to close it, you just pull that down and it drops shut. Beautiful knife. I bought this in Canada, and the Canadian dollar difference is a lot, and they also have higher taxes for stuff, sales tax. So I paid $420 for this. In America, you can get these for about $280, or you can get the aluminum version for $200, or the mini version for about $180-ish. And I would like the green aluminum because I've seen reviews of people with these that are like 10-15 years old, and the aluminum will pick up scratches and wear, which I call character. Just like titanium eventually will pick up what they call snail trails, which are just little light scratches, and it just shows that the knife's been carried, it's been used, it's got some stories to tell, and to me that's cool. I do appreciate a knife that's pristine, but if it's got some stories to tell, like my pocket clip that got scraped up, it's cool. To me, it's cool. This is an S90V blade, which is pretty nice. Maybe a little bit chippy, slightly. I don't have any big chips, but it's not something I would be blade steel's a whole rabbit hole. Maybe we'll talk about that some other day. This one I struggled a little bit with getting my thumb on that thing to open it. Over time I got used to it and got the knack, but it's a little bit tiny for me, so I struggled with that a bit. But it's a nice little knife that I just take the time to open up when I'm gonna cut up an apple or something, you know. And I always carry a fixed blade. This is a Microtech SBD. This is a Borca collaboration. Borca is I think an Italian knife maker. Don't quote me on that. One side of this is full serrated and one is a plain edge. I always want to have something serrated on me, and the reason is, if you use a knife and you cut enough stuff, you're going to realize serrations are awesome. For some reason, I always heard people don't like the serrations because you can't resharpen them. You can if you get a diamond file, you get into there in that grooves, you can reshape them if you've really trashed them. But they take, if you have to resharpen some serrations, that thing has, it probably doesn't owe you anything at that point, and it's probably done its job, and maybe you should retire it, or just sharpen it again, figure it out, or send it off to someone who can serrate it, you know, someone who knows what they're doing. Personally, I would just take a little diamond grit file and clean them up if I really trashed them. But for cutting like a seatbelt, ratchet straps, stuff like that, once your plain edge dulls out, it's almost useless. With the serrations, it's always going to have an extra cut in it. It's always going to be able to do something even if you've trashed it, because it's kind of like a saw. I love this knife. We'll do an in-depth review on this at some point. So that's what I'm carrying today. I like to cycle stuff out a little bit, try different stuff, but I also kind of fall into my habits. There's the few that I always like to have on me, but I still like to mix stuff up. And I always have a serration and a plain edge. Now, maybe this is overkill. Maybe it is. Maybe I just like stuff and I like having a lot of knives on me. Part of that is different purposes for the knife. Now, I'm always in different situations where I need to use a knife for a specific thing, and I want a certain knife to do for that. So that's a whole nother. If you carry a knife, you know you've been in weird situations where your knife didn't kind of do the job, or you would have wanted something different. I'm just tucking all my knives back where they go. But why do I collect them? Why do I have a bunch of them? Why do I have expensive knives? Blah, blah, blah. Well, okay. Let's talk about guns a bit, because I mentioned the weapon aspect. You don't want knives as a weapon. There's other things for that, like mace. This is bear spray. Stuff like that. If you're dealing with someone that's just belligerent or stuff, it's always good to have a non-lethal nearby. Something that just annoys them and it makes them kind of rethink what they're doing in life. And obviously those are crazy situations I hope to never be in, but a lot of people think that way about these things, which I think are tools. And you can buy a real cool gun or a basic gun for $500, like a Glock. Like, I can buy a Glock for the price of this knife or my Chris Reeve. But how often do I actually get to use that day to day? I had to use a handgun a month ago on an animal, but the chances of me being like, oh, I need my gun, pretty slim. When there's a situation where I need my knife, it's like a dozen times a day for random stuff that I don't see coming. So I really think everyone should have one at least nearby for random tasks, so that they're not looking around asking someone to help. You can just take care of it. It's done. For some reason, if your seatbelt's jammed, you can cut your seatbelt. Just random stuff. But also, to me, it's something kind of primal that I think is in my blood and in a lot of people's blood. Back to the caveman days, we would find a sharp rock and go, cool, Now I can clean an animal, get the fur off, clean up the fur. Now I got a fur jacket, and I also got some steaks. So it's super primal and like this visceral like connection to that I feel is really literally on a spiritual level to me, that these tools, we're not born with claws. We have our teeth, but they kind of suck for defense unless you're in a really bad situation. We're not born with claws, and we're not born with hammers for hands. We have to make a hammer out of a rock, and then eventually break up enough rocks to find some iron, then smelt that iron, make an iron hammer, and then eventually get fancy enough with your iron that you're making high levels of stainless steels and blah 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 for different things. So the knives that you can access today for relatively low cost, the quality of the steel you're getting, if you were to go back to, even if you're not going back in time, if you go to some of these Amazon tribes, these people that are uncontacted or just don't have access to high quality tools, that tool is worth its weight in gold. They would give you any gold they have just for a good knife or a good hammer, a good saw. I like carrying silky saws. I have a saw in the trunk in case I find a nice piece of wood that I want to make something out of. There's a hatchet in the back that I welded and made. I've got some axes at home. Like, these tools, even if you're not using them every single day, just the fact that you can own something that historically is ridiculously high value is, to me, amazing. Like, if you go to a third world country where you can't just go down to Home Depot and buy a piece of 2x4, if you have the tools to make a 2x4, you can make all the 2x4s you want if you know what you're doing. I need some more tools to be able to do that kind of stuff, but I do have tools to get close. I'll make a okay 2x4. It won't be pretty, won't be super straight, but I'll get something. I want some more tools for doing that kind of stuff, because I do kind of identify as a prepper, but if you can't just go to Home Depot and pick up processed lumber, or you can't just call someone to fix a tree in your backyard that needs trimmed or whatever, just these random things you don't even see coming, if you can't just fix that with outside help, if you have a tool that can recreate materials and products or fix products and things, that's such a vital tool. Like a hammer, for example. Have you ever broken a hammer? I mean, I've seen broken hammers, but they just keep going. So the value that a $5 Harbor Freight piece of junk has in potential, you could use that hammer for months and years, and if you break it, I'm going to be impressed. And the value you've gotten out of that over that lifetime is amazing. So like these knives, like some of these knives, like this out the front, if you take care of this, it could last my lifetime. It could last dozens and dozens of years, but it will need disassembled and cleaned at some point. And these come with proprietary screws. I'll do a more detailed video, but you can't just unscrew this because you need a special tool, which I don't own yet. And you can clean them out with compressed air, oil, stuff like that, but someday that's going to get gunked up bad enough to where I want to or need to disassemble it to do a proper cleaning. A fixed blade, this guy, one solid piece of steel, super rust resistant. That knife, this and my other fixed blades are going to last longer than I am. They're going to be around, they may become heirlooms. And if my children or I end up in society where you can't just go pick up a good knife to go process some meat or game or just do some work around the house, if you can't just go pick up a tool, if I already have a tool that's good at that specific thing, that specific task, like a nice serrated knife for cutting up some wood, a nice, smooth, really clean cutter like this Chris Reeve that is just nasty sharp and just really good at just being a good cutting, stiff knife. You want those knives, those tools, those axes, those saws, those woodworking tools, those food processing tools, chef knives, kitchen knives. You want those things that do that one job really well, so that you're not trashing one knife to do everything, because you can't do everything with one specific blade shape, one geometry, one blade steel, blah, blah, blah. So to me, it's a practical thing, a really primal, spiritual thing as well, but also it's just cool, because I don't see many other people collecting these kind of things. So if they have to run into a problem that they need to fix something, they're kind of going to be up shit's creek, so to speak. So what have I not addressed? Eventually I'll talk more specifically about the cost of knives and justifying that, but to me, for example, this Chris Reeve knife, I don't beat on this knife. I rarely use it unless I want to do something very detailed and stuff, because I don't want to, this is my good sharp knife. I have others that are good and sharp for certain things, but you know, I'm going to use any of these knives a million times more and more practically than I'm ever going to use my guns, hopefully, unless I'm hunting or 1776 all over again. And I really hope it doesn't come to that, to be 100% honest. I hope none of my knives, I hope and pray that they never have to get used in self-defense or anything like that. I hope none of my guns have to be used like that. I hope, and that's also a fascinating thing about them. I have a lot of hammers I've made by hand out of steel, brass, wood. Someday I'll show off stuff I've made, but you can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use a hammer to hurt someone. So there's this contrast that's kind of scary, but also a little fascinating, that you can use a baseball club to go play baseball with your kid, or you can destroy someone's car with it. Which is a little crazy to think about, but some of the tools I have, I could build a log cabin. But if I was back in the day of Braveheart or The Patriot, The Last Samurai, stuff like that, some of those tools I have now, if I had them back then, would be so incredibly valuable. That's something I like thinking about, that the things I own now are going to outlast me and eventually end up in someone else's hand, and they're going to keep using them. That's really cool to me. This car I'm sitting in, it might get totaled tomorrow. It might make it another 20 years, but probably not more than 20 years, which is disappointing, but what else can you buy that lasts this long? Even this tobacco pipe, I want to say I've had this maybe 7 years. And I have a pipe from my grandpa that's probably 30 years old. I have smoked out of it before, but I don't smoke it because I want to maintain it and just preserve it, but it's still usable, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I love things that last. Not many things are made to last, to be maintained. Or if they are made to be maintained, maybe people don't do it. And part of that, like, why would you want an expensive knife? Well, you're getting better quality build, maybe made in the US, which matters a bit. You're getting something that can outlast you. If you get a cheap knife, you're risking it falling apart in your hand, closing on your fingers, stuff like that. There are cheap knives that just do the job. For example, right here. This is a super cheap, made in China kind of piece of junk, but it's got some crummy serrations there, a little weird seatbelt cutter kind of thing. This is a dive knife. This is for like getting in the water. So if I don't care if I'm gonna beat up the knife, something like this I would use, but I've had this for probably 10 years. Haven't really needed it for anything specific, but I just kick it around in case I want to use it for something that I don't want to use on my good knife. So there are a place for cheaper knives, and there's like Morocco. I have quite a few Morocco knives. They're very affordable and they're really good. They're really good. Another example of things made to last, Zippo lighter. You can replace the wick, replace the flint, replace the fluid, keep it going for your whole life. You can have one Zippo the rest of your life if you take care of it, which is really cool. Well, I think I've rambled on enough. If you got any questions, or you're one of those knives specifically you want to see me do an in-depth review of, go ahead and leave a comment. I got a bunch of knives I want to do videos on. It's just a matter of getting the time to do it and not having my kids in the room get noisy and stuff, so I can focus on the video and blah blah blah. But eventually I'm going to do some more videos. I've got more videos on the 2 knife reviews I've got out so far than any of my other videos, so there's a market for it. So I had a cool little interaction with someone who was looking at getting a knife, helped him out. I'm sure he would have got what he wanted in the end, but I love those interactions because these are things you're going to own for so long unless you get bored of it and trade it out or whatever, or need the money. And that's another thing. If you really need the money, just like a gun, a good knife is going to keep its value unless you've broken it. So with that said, thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. We'll see you later.